Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories. I had a life I loved, including a beautiful home, comfortable bank accounts, and a husband who worshipped the ground I walked on. But that wasn't the reason I was beaming with happiness as I left the office at the end of the workday on Monday. It was for a less public reason. My husband was away on business for the week, and I had a date with my lover John as soon as I got home and got ready. John was a relatively recent acquisition and took me to places in bed that no man had ever taken me before. That's why I skipped and walked to my car in the office parking lot with a smile on my face. I was just approaching when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around to see who it was, hoping like hell it was John, and saw a fist coming straight at my face. I barely had time to catch a glimpse of the angry woman's face behind the fist before a painful cry escaped me. I think on instinct I fell to the ground and rolled into a fetal position, allowing the woman who never said a word to kick me in the back. She must have had enough of it at some stage because the next thing I knew she was gone. Fearing that she might come back, I called the emergency number. The ambulance took me to the hospital where I passed out a little since I arrived before the night rush. I was immediately noticed other than a split lip and a few bruises. I was fine with a vague warning to watch for symptoms of delayed concussion and advice to ice the bruises. I was sent home. The police questioned me at reception after the medical staff had finished with me, but with only a vague description of a slender blonde woman in a hat and dark glasses, there was little hope of catching the crazy woman. I couldn't even tell them if she was a natural blonde, let alone give a reason for the attack. I asked them to give me a ride back to my car, but they explained that it was against the rules. I tried to put on one of my helpless, feminine smiles, but it hurt my lip too much. I tried to call John to ask for a ride and leave from our evening date, but he didn't answer the phone, so I had no choice but to call a taxi. My new plan for the evening was to grab a bottle of painkillers, maybe vodka, add some ice for bruises, and take a long, hot bath until it was time to call my husband at the end of his day. He always knew how to help me make sense of things and make me laugh when I was sad. After I told him what happened, I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped everything and drove 4 hours home. I was always his priority. I guess I'd only been home for half an hour or so. The bathtub was full and the ice was cooling my martini when there was a knock on the door. Thinking it was the Chinese takeout I ordered, I opened the door. When I came to, I only had vague memories of what happened. I tried to sit up, but my head hurt terribly. Lowering my head, I felt my face. Something had dried on it. I scratched a little and looked at the scratch underneath my fingernail. Blood. Oh no. Gently and very carefully I felt my entire face. The eyebrows, cheekbones, and jaw were not damaged. My nose hurt, but it seemed unharmed. I thanked the gods that it didn't seem to be broken. I slowly turned my head. There were also dried blood spatters on the floor. Whoever the attacker was, he must have hit me hard. I continued my search. There was a lump on the back of my head, and I felt a bruise, probably where my head hit the floor after I fell. Overcoming the pain, I straightened up my head, protested. I slammed the door and, staggering, made my way to the sofa where I practically fell on it. I think I was hallucinating for a while, and my brain was conjuring up images that flashed through my mind, my consciousness halfway between flashbacks and movie-like stills. Definitely a woman, stocky with long black hair and almost bushy eyebrows. The rest of the face was hidden by a scarf. That's all I saw, except for some kind of wooden handle or bat flying right between my eyes. I woke up embarrassed still on the couch. The clock above the mantel showed 4:25 a.m., and I had a terrible headache. Any movement felt like a bowling ball was ringing inside my skull, hitting the walls. As I staggered into the kitchen, I felt a pain in my groin. Whoever that was, she must have put her boot in my groin. I swallowed 2 painkillers and staggered to the bathroom. The mirror in the bathroom did not reveal a very pleasant sight. Whatever they hit me with, my nose was not hurt, but my cheek was broken, and I had a black eye. Who the crap was this woman, and another one this afternoon? Excuse me, yesterday? Even though I was a real estate agent, I didn't think I made any enemies. What the hell is going on? I was wondering if I should call more than one ambulance, but decided not to. The doctor said yesterday afternoon to watch for delayed concussion for 8 hours. It's been longer since I was hit the second time. I also thought about calling the police, but again decided not to. Our front door was not visible from the hotel grounds, and I had less data to tell them than last time. However, one woman accidentally attacking me is one thing, but two is just weird. I decided, despite the late hour, to call Dave. He would know what to do. Oh, Dave. What did he think when he tried to call me last night like he always did and I didn't answer? He would try calling my cell phone and home phone and then ask where I was. I hope this didn't make him think that I was sneaking out of the house when he wasn't here. I have always been incredibly careful in my dealings. Wouldn't it be ironic if a false tip gave me away? Taking my mobile phone, I checked how many missed calls there were from my husband. Strange, but there were none. I picked up my home phone and dialed the number to get a list of my latest actions. The last unanswered call was made 3 days ago. What the? I couldn't remember the last time Dave didn't talk to me when he was gone. In fact, it was part of my safety net that I would routinely call him on his hotel phone, citing the supposed dangers of using a cell phone too much before going to meet my lover at a motel, or on very rare occasions inviting him out here. This reminded me that I had called John on my cell phone the previous afternoon and had not yet deleted the recording. I wasn't stupid enough to store his number in my phone, and without a trace, there was no evidence. There were several photos on it that should never have seen the light of day, but my phone was the only place they were kept, and they were hidden there. I also made sure it wasn't locked with a regular password or one of those boilerplate items, just my fingerprint and a huge, strong password. Dave thinks it's a work requirement not to share my password on the rare occasions when he needed to use my phone. I opened it for him and never let him out of my sight. I decided it was safer to store the photos on my phone that I can protect than any other media that could be discovered. I deleted the call to John, left a message in his message bank, and noted that he also did not answer my previous call. I'm surprised Dave didn't call despite the early hour. I called him. I really needed to hear his comforting voice. The call went straight to the message bank, which was weird. Maybe he lost his charger and his battery died or something. This wasn't the first time. By this time, it was already after 5 in the morning, and I had a show at 9 a.m. There was no way I could show up looking like I did now, so I put on more makeup than usual to cover it up. After all, I had a whole arsenal. I should probably explain this. You see, all through high school, I was very ordinary. You've all met those who watched from the sidelines as all the boys worth their salt ignore them to go after the athletic, popular, bright girls. Although I was proud that I was not like some other plain ones, they exposed themselves to everyone mistakenly believing that being popular meant they had succeeded. Thus, I was a virgin when I left school at 16. My parents were not overly ambitious towards me and were happy to support me as I attended a series of evening courses to gain some administrative qualifications while I worked as a waitress in my spare time. I lost my virginity to someone who I realized too late was a smart predator. I realized this when the next morning, after a quick, not convenient in his hotel room, he asked me to leave. I chalked it up to experience and thought that this episode had made me an expert at choosing predators that did not happen. My next 2 encounters ended just as disastrously. Though one after them was a guy with less experience than me here, I already left him after the first night. This is how I sailed through life until I was 20. That's when Dave came into my life. Dave was a year ahead of me in school and seemed to be my male equivalent. He was tall and thin, but nothing else about him was striking. We got to talking at the restaurant where I worked, where he invited several clients to lunch. After the first meeting, I learned enough to understand that he was a man with a clear career plan and determination to get things done. I accepted the date, and the rest, as they say, is history. I slept with him about 2 weeks after we met, and it was obvious that we were both so inexperienced that it was uncomfortable. We were both willing to learn and use each other to do just that. If I had to describe my life 12 months before his 21st birthday, I would say satisfied. I had a boyfriend who was clearly moving and evolving and who clearly loved me to death. We were never invited to high-class social events, but neither of us thought it was important. We moved into an apartment together, and I was taking a realtor course paid for by Dave. When my crucial birthday arrived, Dave celebrated his first big bonus check by spending part of it on me. There was my own car, a voucher for 2 days with my personal beauty consultant, and a larger diamond engagement ring than I ever expected to wear. I said yes at the right time, got behind the wheel of the car, and put off receiving the voucher. Oh, how I wish I could just tear up this damn voucher. This way I could have a husband whose phone wasn't turned off and a face without bruises. Dave reminded me several times about the voucher, but was immersed in planning a simple wedding. Neither of us had a large list of friends. In the end, I decided to use it as a little indulgence for myself to relax before the big day. During the day, that's when I found out what the voucher was actually for. This gave me 2 days with Caroline. She was an elegant woman in her early 30s. I don't know what qualities she had, but she had an amazing eye for how to demonstrate femininity. Our first destination was a hairdresser where I was forced to do a major overhaul, and I have to say I was nervous about the outcome. The rest of that first day was spent shopping. Caroline led me past my usual favorite clothing stores to the more upscale end of town. Suffice it to say that later that evening, Caroline used my phone to ask Dave to update the money on my credit card. At the end of the day, I looked in the mirror at my new hairstyle and clothes, and almost called Caroline to tell her not to worry. The next day, the hairstyle and clothes were for real. Oh, why didn't I do this? The next day, we were at the salon by 8 a.m. I was pampered with a pedicure and manicure, a facial and scalp massage. Then I was introduced to Colin. Colin was apparently more fun than a tree full of monkeys, and if you believe him, was once a beautician to some pretty famous stars. She and Caroline used the face as a canvas to paint, sculpt, trim, and highlight over the next 2 hours, including several erases. I wasn't allowed to look at myself in the mirror until the two of them declared me perfect. When I stood up and saw my reflection, I involuntarily took a step back. This is when Caroline's true genius emerged. The clothes and hairstyle that had looked out of place the day before now framed a face that I had to admit was beautiful. I couldn't believe it. The change was stunning. Caroline forced me to look up from admiring my own reflection for Colin's 2-hour lecture on how he had uncovered the natural masterpiece that was me. I thanked him and Caroline profusely for this life-changing experience. If I had known how this would actually affect me, I might have committed murder right then and there. Dave did a funny double-take when I got home, but quickly recovered, telling me that the results simply showed me as he saw me from the beginning. That night was the wildest night we had ever spent in bed, and 3 days later we were married. Admiration and the honeymoon were for man-dense and confused men. Handsome men who had never paid me any attention before were now vying for the chance to dance with me. I supported them in this whenever Dave didn't mind. He was the first to admit that dancing wasn't his favorite activity. With all this attention, it still didn't dawn on me that the game had changed. This realization began when the wedding photo album was delivered. I saw that I was absolutely stunning, and for the first time I felt that I had married a man a little shorter than myself. A fact that was obvious when you looked at us standing together in various stage settings. I probably feel this way deep down even today, which is neither logical nor fair. What have I achieved in the 5 years since my marriage compared to Dave? He built his own business from scratch and was on his way to becoming a millionaire. I used my looks to become a direct real estate seller. Despite the unequal score, for some reason, I felt superior. 5 years, months after disclosures of the true self were like a rebirth. I became popular. I was praised, I was entitled, and yes, within 6 months I became an unfaithful wife. In my defense, it was extremely difficult to never give in to temptation. Suddenly, my mind, which believed it was being carried by a body with 5 stars out of 10, was attacked by men with 9 stars out of 10. It took waking up with a third such man for me to realize that they were simply more attractive versions of the predator who had taken my virginity. From then on, I was truly in the driver's seat when it came to choosing lovers. So on my broken face here and now, I prepared to apply a good layer of concealer and foundation, feeling sorry for myself. I tried to call Dave every 15 minutes or so, but had no luck. It took an hour and a half of layering until I had everything hidden to my satisfaction. I had absolutely no luck either in being able to communicate with my husband or in explaining the strange behavior of 2 women. I made myself some coffee and drank it, feeling more alone than I had in years. I never made friends easily with women, and because Dave didn't respond, I was isolated in my darkest hour. With an hour to spare, I texted John to call me when he could, then looked at some pointless crap in the stupid box until it was time to leave for the office. Carrying the laptop bag and luxury briefcase Dave bought me last year to my car in the detached garage, I placed them in the back seat. I slammed the door and turned to the driver's door. I don't know where it came from. All I know is that she was standing right in front of me as I turned away from the back door of my car. I can only assume that she must have been hiding behind the wall of the garage outside or somewhere else when I entered. Again, it all happened so quickly that it was hard to remember when it ended. I remember falling to the ground and feeling someone's footstep on my hands, which I instinctively raised to protect my face. The blows eventually stopped, and I ran towards the house. The brutality of the attack was completely shocking, and my face was burning. I leaned against the door for a brief moment before stumbling towards the downstairs bathroom. The mirror showed 3 long scratches on my left cheek and 2 on my right, apparently caused by raking fingernails. My right arm and forearm hurt, but luckily, nothing was broken. I called the police again, then Dave and John, while I waited for the cops to arrive. No one answered. I felt so alone. The office called just after 9 o'clock to ask why I had abandoned a client and only calmed down a little when I told them I had been attacked. Working for a real estate company, they apparently assumed I was either lying or exaggerating the extent of the damage to my face. As I suspected, the police were of little use. In fact, it worked out for Media Instinct, the impression that due to yesterday's murder and 2 armed robberies, I was wasting their time with vague descriptions of another woman of average height, with red or brown hair that could be natural or painted. Hard to tell when most of them were hidden under a baseball cap. They interviewed a couple of neighbors for show and then left after asking me if I needed an ambulance. No, I didn't need an ambulance. I needed my husband to answer my phone call. In complete confusion, I closed the door behind the cops, walked into the living room, and yelled at the photo on the mantel where Dave and I were standing, "Next time you'll take your phone charger, Dave, even if I have to pack the damn thing for you myself." An attack by 1 random woman was not unusual, 2 was statistically unlikely, but 3 was almost impossible. So it was time for me to think carefully about the possible reasons why I had made so many enemies. I couldn't think of anything this time. There was not so much makeup that could hide the scratches. To make matters worse, I had to erase earlier applied creams with makeup remover pads to apply a little disinfectant to my new scratches. It is unknown what kind of microbes this psychopath had under her nails. The scratches burned like crazy, and the disinfectant felt like I had poured gasoline on my skin. The task was made even more difficult by the fact that my right arm was starting to feel raw and bruised. By the end, my face was red and blotchy, and the last attacker must have been wearing heels or something. Accordingly, bruises appeared on my arms and forearms in distinct forms. I dialed Dave's number again, desperate to hear his voice, but again the call went straight to the message bank. Then I kicked myself. I could send him an email. When he sees him, he will surely hurry home. The problem was that my laptop was in my car. I clumsily walked down the stairs like a 90-year-old woman. The bruises on my lower back legs and growing were also noticeable. But when I went to turn the bolt on the front door, I simply couldn't. I was afraid that someone might be waiting behind the door. I scolded myself for my cowardice. All those real estate seminars finally came in handy. I gave a pep talk. What inspired the beatings were a mystery to me, but of course after the 3 women for some reason took out their anger on me. They were finished. Probably a case of mistaken identity, that's what I thought. Now I started looking at things logically from the front door of the house. I can see the door to the garage, but not the inside or behind the wall on the far side. However, if I go out the back door, I might sneak and approach the garage from an unexpected direction and ambush someone. I walked from room to room, looking out the windows, checking the route around the house to the garage. The problem was that there were several blind spots where someone could be waiting, and besides, the backyard was very secluded. If someone pesters me there, no one will see them, and they can do whatever they want to me without witnesses. I was in no shape to defend myself, let alone fight back. I was thinking about all this when my phone rang. Dave, finally. I rushed towards him, ignoring the protests of my bruised and battered limbs. I was disappointed it wasn't Dave, it was my office. They managed to calm my client down and arranged for me to meet him at the hotel in 30 minutes. My excuses that I was injured fell on deaf ears. They were working lean during these depressing times, and if I couldn't handle it, they made it clear to me that they could find a replacement who could. This still left me with the problem of how to get to my car safely. A light bulb went on in my aching head. I'll call a taxi. I did just that, giving very specific instructions about parking in the middle of the driveway, where I could see everything from the house. After all, there could be someone hiding behind the garage or behind the hedge on the property line, but of course with the taxi driver as a witness, I would be safe. While I was waiting for the taxi, I did everything I could for my face. 10 minutes later, the taxi horn prompted me to make one last visual check outside and then an awkward dash to the safety of the taxi. I didn't really relax until we were a block away from home. The driver was a woman, which worried me, but after she asked where I was going, she lost interest in me. 15 minutes later, as we approached our destination, I realized that I had eaten my fill. The house keys were in my briefcase in the back seat of my car, which was parked in the garage. If I ordered the taxi to return, I would be at least 25 minutes late for the meeting, and the client may well be very indignant at being stood up a second time and demand my head from the agency. I decided to somehow get through the scheduled meeting. I could show the client the exterior and report some bureaucratic mistakes with the keys. I'll almost certainly miss out on the sale, but hopefully I won't get fired. I dialed Dave's number again before we pulled into the driveway of the house. In the end, I had to wait half an hour for the stamp client. She also came by taxi. She was a tall, dark-haired woman of about 30, quite pretty, except for the eyes hidden behind her dark glasses. She was carrying one of those huge bags that seemed to be a fashion trend this season. When she saw me, she looked at the piece of paper in her right hand before stuffing it into her bag. Walking towards me, she seemed to swallow my excuse for the key fiasco, but looked irritated when I explained that the best thing I could suggest was to walk outside, looking in the windows. Luckily, I knew everything about the property by heart, so I didn't have to refer to any notes also left in the briefcase. I knew in my heart that if this house didn't sell quickly, the owners might lower the price enough for Dave and me to buy it. It was a beautiful green area, populated by young urban professionals. Dave and I would fit in perfectly here. We walked out into the backyard where I pointed out a spacious art studio located separately from the main house. After I finished listing its features, I walked over to the master bedroom window and peered through the gap in the curtains to see how good the view was. I heard an inappropriate sound behind me. Looking back, I would describe it as a clicking sound. I turned around and saw that the client was holding one of those telescopic batons that are advertised in women's magazines for personal protection. Her face turned from cute to distorted hatred. I think she hissed before swinging the baton at me as hard as she could, aiming straight at my head. It hurt excruciatingly when the blow hit my hastily raised forearms, and I actually heard the bone crack. And I think that furious, the woman heard it too. The anger seemed to evaporate from her, and she just stood there and watched as I screamed. As I lowered my hand and the pain overwhelmed me, however, she must have had some residual anger because she hit me on the side of the head. I took most of the blow on myself undamaged hand, but it still knocked me to the ground. The wild woman must have left because when I came out of my stupor lying on the ground, she was no longer there and I was left completely alone. She may have disappeared, but there was something that must have fallen out of her purse when she pulled out the baton. It was the same piece of paper that I saw her stuff into her bag when she arrived. It was lying face up on the ground. It was a photograph about a 5 size. I believe it was a familiar image, one of my favorites. I liked myself there. I was completely confused as to how the hell this crazy woman got a copy. This was a selfie I took about 3 months ago. My phone was in my outstretched hand when I took the photo. Despite everything at that moment, I had the strength to press the button, and the excellent framing was pure luck. It was a very intimate photo of me and John. I remembered the crummy motel room we paid cash for. This was the photograph that the woman used to identify me. Judging by her anger, Mrs. John, I guess. I never asked John about his wife, just as we never talked about Dave. I just didn't think it was important enough to think about it before. Holding my damaged hand, I rolled into a sitting position. No internal debate about whether to call an ambulance this time I did so. However, no police. This path led to my affairs being exposed, which led to Dave finding out, which led to something terrible. How the hell John's baton-wielding psycho wife got her hands on this photo was the question that occupied my mind as I staggered to meet the ambulance. I have never shared this photo with any other person or any other device, even with John. Was my phone hacked? It was the same triage nurse at the hospital, and she was going to call the police, but I talked her out of it. Convinced that it was an accident, she looked at my hand and the scratches on my face and clearly didn't believe me, but still respected my wishes after I vigorously shook my head when she simply asked about my husband. They set my arm, drugged me with some strong painkillers, and then shoved me into a taxi. The taxi driver was kind enough to take me straight to the front door. He even waited until I opened it, went in and locked the door from the inside. Despite the doctor's recommendations, I washed down the painkillers with a large, very large shot of vodka, while simultaneously making up a story that I was going to tell my husband. I left him many messages. He will be very confused and worried when he charges his phone and hears them. I tried to call him again, failed, then remembered my idea to send him an email. My laptop was in the car, and by this time it was already dark, so there was no way to get in. I was going to take any more chances with another attack to take it away. Then I remembered our old desktop computer. We used it before we both had laptops, and Dave continued to use it sometimes when he wanted to see something on the big screen. He was standing in the office. I turned it on and went to pour myself some vodka. When I returned, there was a small spinning hourglass on the screen, and under it the word sync. I answered the call of nature, which took some time. Have you tried to unzip the side zipper of your pants with one arm and a sling? By the time I got back to the office, the computer had finished syncing, and what it was syncing with and seeing on the screen was just terrible. Well, that explains it all. Who were these terrible women, and why did they do what they did to me? This knowledge was almost comforting after the complete confusion of the events of the previous 24 hours. However, what the screensaver showed on our old home computer explained much more. It became clear why, for the first time in forever, my husband did not call me while he was on a business trip, and why he did not answer the calls. Why he might never call me again, how I was arrogant, and most likely lost the rest of my life. I barely managed to reach the bathroom when I painfully vomited. I touched the tender left side of my face, then felt the purple bruise and scratches on the right before leaving the bathroom to turn off the monitor. Displaying disgusting, destructive photos on the screensaver of a computer I hardly ever used. It displayed the contents of my phone, more precisely the photographs on it. They flashed on the computer screen, changing approximately every 10 seconds. Oddly enough, photographs of houses or specific interior elements were interspersed with much more graphic photographs. I remembered how a couple of weeks ago my boss hired a tech company to update our phones. I watched like a hawk while the technician played with mine. It was now obvious to me that at least one of these changes resulted in the photos that I had so carefully hidden on it being transferred to my desktop along with the rest of my photo folder. And if they were able to see the desktop of the old computer, could they? Oh no. Dave's laptop was much more modern than the old home computer. A feeling of dread came over me as I imagined Dave looking at the 100 or so trophy photographs meant only for my personal pleasure. Photos of me and different men in different poses. Can I imagine David capturing photographs of my lovers' faces and printing them, taking them to my work, and comparing the faces to the names in their files with the help of our secretary who always had a soft spot for him? Unfortunately, yes, names led to addresses and wives. Wives who saw these photographs, wives who in my case provided the blows, scrapes, and bruises. After yet another unanswered call to my husband's phone, I struggled upstairs and checked his wardrobe, but what I saw only made my depression worse. Then, ignoring the terrible photos on the old computer screensaver, I turned on the monitor again and logged into our bank's online website. I saw a few tiny numbers where there should have been big ones. I dropped my chin to my chest. The realization of what a spoiled, conniving, entitled person I had become shocked me. The blow was as painful as all my physical injuries combined. Working with both commercial and domestic properties, there is never a shortage of male clients to choose from, and I made a choice. Perhaps in the early days I tried to be very careful with my lovers. Back then I had a strict rule: no photos, videos, or any traces. Oh, I did make a few mistakes along the way. I was almost exposed by one guy who wanted to continue the relationship after it had run its course. In my opinion, it was then that I decided to limit myself to married men who had as much to lose as I did. But I calmed down and relaxed some of my rules when it became obvious that Dave trusted me implicitly. Error, big mistake, huge. I should have stuck to the no photos rule. I kicked myself for my absolute arrogance, wondering how I could let this happen. I became the popular girl I dreamed of being in school and somehow had to back up that popularity by sleeping with all the hot men. My arrogance was that I thought that my marriage was guaranteed to survive the revelation of its true nature. Yes, I'm not stupid enough to believe that Dave would never be able to find out about my hobbies, but I had long ago developed a plan for this case which I was sure Dave would accept. After all, he will never find a replacement close to my level, and he will probably forgive me in the end. My plan was based on the assumption that Dave finds out about only one lover. I would tell him that this time I was weak. They say he was a skilled seducer. I would cry, I would promise that this will never happen again, and then go to bed and let me share all that I have learned and kept to myself. My thoughts wandered. Maybe it was just an attempt at self-preservation on my part, delaying the inevitable conclusion that Dave had no intention of forgiving me. He didn't catch me in bed with another guy, causing my long-rehearsed reaction. How could I have foreseen that he would find me in cyberspace with dozens of my lovers at the same time and then covered in bruises? I screamed. What do you think of this story? I like the fact that the woman realized her mistakes and the revenge of her lover's wife was epic too. Your opinion is welcome in the comments. See you soon.